I think over the last years and probably the last decade, we've seen this kind of race to the bottom among developers of wind energy in terms of cutting costs and making it more cost competitive. I think we've seen that in a bigger sense in the offshore wind space, where costs have been much higher than the onshore renewables. And the cost cuts that we've seen in the previous decade has definitely been driven by the larger turbines. So that has, first of all, kind of been creating this kind of race to the bottom, driven by new technology developments on the turbine side. So the turbine manufacturers have been very focused on R&D. It has been an R&D race among themselves, if you will, and that has also caused a lot of investments. Now, at the same time, we had the global pandemic, which led to a lot of supply chain disruptions, and then the rebooting of the economy after the pandemic started to kind of trickle down, and we've seen that caused a lot of inflationary pressure across the supply chain. Now, for a lot of these turbine manufacturers, they had already locked in orders, contracts where the price were already set, but the input prices skyrocketed in terms of cost, and that has led to lower margins, losses, and so forth. Now, in addition, we're still seeing that there might be some signs of improvement, but we are still seeing that these R&D efforts, especially on the offshore wind side, will continue as the size race is increasing, and that will also cause new investments to be made. But because of the very, very kind of accelerated nature that these new R&D efforts need to be done, they're not really making enough money on their kind of expansions, investments into new models.
ولكن أليكس، هل يبدو أن عام 2023 سيكون أفضل لصناعة طاقة الرياح؟ هل يمكن أن نرى تلك الشركات تعكس خسائر العامين الماضيين؟
With time, I think we saw at the end of last year some signs of improvements on the financials among these turbine OEMs. We are now seeing that a lot of these locked-in contracts that they were struggling with from before has kind of expired, and now they can actually, let's say, offload a little bit of that cost pressure onto the developers. But there's still this R&D race. And we're also seeing some worrying signs of higher kind of warranty claims among the turbine OEMs, which is also natural when you move very fast into bigger turbine models that haven't necessarily been tested all that much. And we've seen new reports coming out of the larger turbine models having a little bit higher issues and so forth. So the jury is still out, but we are seeing some positive signs, and we also expect inflation to be reduced, especially in 2024.
إعادة نقل وتوطين سلاسل الإمداد القائمة عالمياً على خلفية خفض الغرب لاعتماده على الصين، كيف ستؤثر على صناعة طاقة الرياح على المدى القصير إلى المتوسط؟
Yeah, I think when we talk about kind of reconfiguration of the supply chain, we're typically talking about this trilemma between reliability, affordability, and sustainability. And if you are going to, let's say, reduce your dependency on one sole country or reconfigure it to be more reliable for that, which is the focus of Europe now, for example, it will come at the cost of lower affordability, meaning that the cost probably will come up a little bit in the short to medium term. New expansions will be needed. We will need to see new investments being made, and that can also prove costly. We know that a lot of the components that are coming out from China are comparably cheaper than what has been made, for example, in Europe. But it also comes down to the priority of the policymakers, for example. When we talk about Europe now that tries to kind of reduce its dependency on Russian gas, at the same time trying to reduce its dependency on China in terms of the supply chain, policymakers might need to make somewhat of a choice between reaching ambitious capacity targets and basically having a made in Europe supply chain.
بالحديث عن صناع القرار أليكس، في أوروبا هناك ما مجموعه نحو 80 جيجا وات من مشاريع طاقة الرياح التي ما زالت عالقة في مراحل مختلفة من عمليات الترخيص، وهذا حجم كبير خاصة إذا ما قورن بحجم طاقات الرياح المركبة اليوم في أوروبا والبالغة قدرتها نحو 190 جيجا وات. لماذا تحديدا مسألة ترخيص مشاريع طاقة الرياح مسألة ضغطت بشكل كبير على صناعة طاقة الرياح في السنوات الأخيرة بالرغم من المستهدفات الطموحة للحكومات؟
I think you mentioned it there. The capacity targets have been set, but it's quite easy to set ambitious targets, and it's easy to kind of talk the talk. But I think the industry now understands that it's time to walk the walk as well. And in the next couple of years, we'll probably see a lot of much more very dedicated efforts by politicians to actually deliver on these targets. Now, we see that now that there are much more talk about concrete measures in order to strengthen the supply chain, shortening permitting times, and debottlenecking it. New targets have led to new areas being made available for the wind industry. It's been getting an influx of capital and new developers wanting to develop their projects. But at the same time, it takes a little bit of time to kind of streamline those permitting processes. But we're seeing some improvements here as well. And now with the Green Deal Industrial Plan in Europe, among others, we're seeing some very concrete measures in terms of speeding up some of these permitting processes.